loves, and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you are new. Hi, hello, my name is Loey, and today I am so excited to finally start this series. Honestly, I really thought this was gonna kind of be a one-off video and I was only going to do one of these. But as I really started doing research and delving deeper and deeper into this one subject, I realized there was no way I could fit multiple of what I'm going to tell you about today into one video. If you are a huge fan of Disney, like yours truly, then you are going to be thrilled to know this entire series is going to be based off of Disney parks that were planned and never built. And when I tell you planned, it's not like there were a few news articles. It's not like, oh, maybe this could be a good idea one day. It's like there were plots of land being considered for purchase. There were maps built, especially the one I'm going to tell you about today. There were so many people on this project, you guys, and it really looks like it was going to be a surefire thing. So this is the first in this series, the Disney park that was never built and that you will never be able to visit, Disney's America. So Disney's America was a theme park that was set to be built in Virginia, very close actually to Washington, D.C., hence the name Disney's America. Instead of focusing on specific Disney films or Disney characters or anything like that, Disney's America was a totally new spin on their theme parks and was actually going to be a trek through American history where you would walk in let's say the 1800s, and you could go backward or forward in time. So something I did not know was that Disney was actually in so much financial trouble in this time period roughly that it was actually very likely that chunks of the company were going to be sold off for profit because they were having such a hard time sustaining what they already had. I mean, in the 90s, they had Disneyland, they had Disney World, not to mention every Disney movie under the sun. All of these projects were time consuming and also very financially expensive. So Disney was actually in a lot of trouble, and their kind of quick fix to this was multiple new park ideas that I'm going to be talking to you guys about a lot. I didn't know any of this, and this is why I think this is so fascinating, because when all of this was being planned and when all of this was happening, I was like a few months old. Like I said, rather than different Disney character themed attractions or things based off of various movies, the entire concept behind Disney's America was really taking you through the history of our nation. You might be already looking at this and thinking, wow, this seems like a great idea. Like, why was this not a thing? And that's because while it was very exciting and while, you know, the concept of a new Disney park was enticing to people, especially one that was not in Florida or in California, but rather in Virginia, where it was more accessible to people who would not have gone to either park, the concept was certainly interesting and enticing, but the buzz around it was not all positive. This is a word-for-word quote from Bob Weiss, or maybe it's Weiss, I'm not sure how to say that, it's W-E-I-S, but this is a literal quote from him. This is not made up by any means. How can you do a park on America and not talk about slavery? This park will deal with the highs and lows. We want to make you feel what it was like to be a slave and escape through the Underground Railroad. And nobody thought like that's a really bad idea. Very, very offensive, very horrifying for people whose families had to endure that, and makes a complete mockery of this thing that so many people in our country endured. So this wound up being a massive PR blunder, and I'll get more into that later, but people were livid. Having a slavery themed section of their theme park was not the only horrible thing about this park, but it was by far the most appalling. And of course, people started debating and a lot of arguments broke out about this. One of the other awful things is that the park was located only miles away from the location of the Battle of the Bull Run, which is now a huge, huge battlefield park where so many people tragically lost their lives in this horrible event, and they were going to build a theme park very close to that. I was really excited when I was doing a lot of research because I managed to find a 1994 article from the New York Times. I'll link it down below. I always link my sources, you guys. I am in fact a high school student. It's literally fine. But I found a literal article from the time by Frank Rich, which reads, "The unbuilt Disney's America has outstripped even Euro Disney," which we will talk about on another episode, "as a public relations headache. last fall, Michael Eisner, Disney's chairman, had to disavow an executive's announcement that a park attraction would make you feel what it was like to be a slave. Just like I said earlier. So this was a legitimate thing. There were articles being written about this. There were people protesting this in the streets. I know a lot of you are still really curious what the park would have been like, so I'm gonna give you a rough breakdown of the layout. And luckily, I managed to find an amazing, amazing website. It had so many screened in copies of photos from the park and of like art designs and of different rides and of the maps and stuff. So I'm very fortunate to be able to give you guys all of this information because otherwise I would have had no idea. I was an infant child. I didn't know about any of this. The park was considered kind of a complementary thing to the Washington, D.C. monuments and the attractions that our nation's capital already brought in. So the entire concept behind it was that tourists would come and they would stay at the park for a day or two, and then there was a Disney's Magical Express bus that would have run from the parks to the national monuments. And so you could spend some days at the park, spend some days in Washington, D.C. The entire concept behind it was probably a good one and would have boosted tourism. There also would have been golf courses and a hotel and all sorts of amazing stuff that you would probably find at any other Disney park. So according to the director of the park is a timeline. We start in the mid-1800s and go backward or forward in time. So kind of based on this, we can assume there's no real main street or anything like you would see in Disney World or Disneyland in Disney's America's plans. Instead, you begin your tour through the park at America's Crossroads, which was set in the early 1800s. There are so many more things about this that if I went into every little detail about these plans, I would be here for hours, but just know that this design was pretty cool and pretty revolutionary at the time. After entering America's Crossroads, you had the option to go back in time or forward in time. Once again, a lot of the, well, pretty much all of the photos are all scanned in from Disney and More, a blogspot account that has documented so many things like this, and they have a lot of other information that is so interesting and cool. So I'll link it down below, you guys. Please support this blog. I'm just saying, I never could have done a video like this without information from websites like that. So the park would have had a President's Square, which was essentially the same concept that you would have seen at Walt Disney World's President's Hall. Now, if you guys have ever been there, it's kind of like this room filled with animatronic presidents who all have a little bit of a spiel and a little bit of a talk through history, what they have done for the nation, so on and so forth. The entire concept here was that that hall would have been moved to Disney's America and it would have been President's Square. I said President's Hall, I meant Hall of Presidents in Walt Disney World. Sorry. Another very questionable thing about this park is that if you went back in time, you could visit a realistic Native American village. You could also go on a whitewater river raft ride that was based on the Lewis and Clark expedition. And what's so crazy is that the concept for that ride, of course the Lewis and Clark part was taken out, but that ride has been actually moved to Disneyland's California Adventure. That's gonna be a really common theme throughout this, is a lot of what wasn't used in Disney's America was actually moved to California Adventure later. So moving on through the park, you then can enter the Civil War Fort part of the park, which has a massive battleground where Civil War reenactments were held. I think the guests were able to participate in these. There was also mention in the blog that I was reading about a water fight. I don't know if that means that it was like water guns that were used or something like that, but yeah, basically guests could participate in this and participate in these huge Civil War reenactments. Then to the next part of the park, there was a replica of Ellis Island from back in the early 1900s. Now, Ellis Island was a place where many immigrants passed through, and there was this big building recreation slash replica where people would enter and there would be different ethnic foods and you would have a true immigrant experience. Again, I just think that really minimalizes what people went through. But yeah, that's kind of what this part of the park was like. So you could see different live shows, have different ethnic foods. I guess sort of similar to the concept of Epcot in terms of the ethnic foods from all around the world. Enterprise was a factory town with a roller coaster known as the Industrial Revolution. There is a photo of the sort of concept concept of this roller coaster and it's pretty cool looking. I'm really into it. Like, look at that. That is so cool. And it's so cool to look at a roller coaster that was literally never created. Can you guys believe this? This is a theme park that doesn't exist. Moving on to Victory Field. This was where you could experience some of the things that America's soldiers would have experienced when they were fighting in the World Wars. To the best of my knowledge, what was here were hangars, and I used to live very close to a military installation, so I know what hangars look like. These look very realistic. The hangars would have contained realistic or maybe even real planes from this time, so fighter jets and different things that would have been used by our military during this point in time. One of the most interesting parts of the park to me is the State Fair. Now, this is a replica of Coney Island and is based in roughly the 1930s, and the whole concept was kind of how even during the Great Depression Americans found ways to have fun, and so this was kind of based on Coney Island. You had that big wooden roller coaster, and I think that there were some like different live shows on baseball and probably some foods from the time. So that's really interesting to me. Lastly, we're finishing out in Family Farm. And again, this one's very intriguing as well. You would have had a realistic farming experience where you would have gotten to milk cows, whether they were animatronic or real, I'm not entirely sure, but you would have gotten to milk cows, taste homemade ice cream, and just kind of experience life the way that a farmer during the time period would have. So Virginia as a whole was pretty mad about this park, and for good reason. You guys saw multiple times during this video, there were some not great ideas. And I have read a couple of different places that Disney kind of tried to like overhaul ideas for the theme park, and maybe it wouldn't be so much a walk through history, but rather a spotlight on the greatest moments in American history and all of the good things about our country and this and that. And it just didn't work out, and plans for the park were finally canceled in 1994. They were revisited at one point, I think in 1997 they were revisited, and then nothing ever came of that. A lot of these ideas, a lot of these rides, a lot of the concepts have been used now in Disneyland's California Adventure. Disneyland tends to recycle a lot of these ideas, especially when you consider like looking at all of these maps. Like, so much time and so much work was put into this. This was a full-fledged thing. This was going to be a park. And it's crazy to me that something so detailed doesn't even exist. Like, when I think about this park now, I guess it's just weird to me to have studied it so much and researched it so heavily and learned about all of the different areas in it, much like I know about the different areas in Disneyland, Tomorrowland, and Fantasyland, and everything like that, Adventureland, but it doesn't exist. This is just one of so many Disney theme parks I'm going to tell you about that you're never going to be able to visit because they don't exist. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I love history. I love talking about history. My dad was a history major and taught history as well. So talking about this is really fun for me. I hope that it was fun for you guys too. I can't wait to talk about more of these. So if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I love you all so much, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.